Okay, so in this lecture we will study a method which is sort of over popular. It is extremely popular and extremely popular, over popular in the sense that compared to its merit it is more popular. And this is the first time in this course that I am teaching you something not with the expectation that you will be using it a lot, but with the understanding, with the expectation that you should know it. Okay. So, there are many pieces of knowledge in human society which you should know about and you should be aware of. So that later it does not happen that you get the false feeling that oh yes, only if only I had known that, then God knows what great things I would do. And this algorithm, this method for which I start with such a negative propaganda is genetic algorithm. Genetic algorithm has a very interesting history, and that is, you have studied a lot of methods earlier, linear programming and then nonlinear programming or nonlinear optimization, and this method, that method, all those methods developed in a little chain of continuity. And beyond a point, the researchers, the experts of the field of optimization found that they have developed very good algorithms which work, but then for really complicated problems, in order to make them work, the computations that have to be done are enormous. And this they had noticed, this they had realized by 70s itself, that is 1970s. Okay. So, around by 1970s, people working in the field of optimization, people applying optimization sort of knew that algorithms require a lot of computation. We have noticed already that in order to develop a Hessian itself, you have to do so much computation and so on. And you have to keep in mind that 1970s happened to a time, the computers of which time are very, very limited compared to the computers of today. Okay. So, that you can figure out, because in your own lifetime you might have noticed how the power of computers have changed over last one decade. Okay. Now, with the computational power of that time, the algorithms required so much computation that it was very difficult to have a reasonable computer do many of the computations and solve many of the really complicated problems. And in fact, there were two kinds of research people were doing. One was to identify really difficult problems where a minimum is hiding somewhere where you would not expect a minimum point, and another in which you try to make shortcuts, you try to short circuit some computations, so as to get the effect of the original computation in any case. And that is how we have noticed that in many problems we get a shortcut method to estimate the second derivative Hessian matrix and so on. So, such things happened by 1970s, and around that time quite a few things happened together. One, somebody got this great idea that how does nature optimize things. Okay. So, one outcome of that was simulated annealing, that is, in nature when you get a sample of molten metal at a very high temperature and if you cool it slowly, then how does nature in that environment find the really low energy configuration for the molten metal. Okay. So, that was one. Another was on the biological arena, and in the biological arena somehow whenever we see our enormous efforts to design a helicopter, and we find that we are effective, our helicopters are effective up to this stage, but then we look at dragonfly and say wow. Then by that time robots were also in use, or robots were also in circulation, in discussion a lot. Okay. And whatever you do to build and develop a nice robot which does a lot of work, you can never reach the smartness, the intelligence and the efficiency of a human being. Of course, efficiency to an extent you can do for, but for very very limited tasks. Okay. And that is true till today, that whatever advanced robots you have, it simply does not equal the capabilities of human beings. If you try to design a dog robot, that typically does not have all the functionalities, all the smartness, all the interesting features, all the interesting capabilities of a dog. Okay. So, somehow there was a sort of myth developed, there was a sort of belief, faith kind of thing developed, that what nature has built, they are the best. Okay. How did nature come to this best? Okay. And for that you already had Darwin's theory of evolution, that nature produces enormous number of samples, and out of those samples, those which are better, they survive, pass on their characteristics through their genes, and these selected individuals later reproduce and produce another big pool, among which there is a fresh round of selection, and so on. Through this evolution, great species develop which are terrific. When there is a cheetah running, we say wow. When there is a human being solving differential calculus, we say wow. Okay. So, this is even monkeys and all sorts of animals, and in plant life the peculiar way, the interesting way all these things happen, they look like ultimate, which we could never develop. Indeed, we could never develop, but that does not mean that they are best. Okay. So, in nature, in a way actually things happen, and better things that happen or more efficient things that happen, they sort of get some sort of a selection. For example, a child is born, a boy is born, and somehow that boy had bad genes or poor genes somehow. Okay. So, there is less chance of this boy passing on his genes, because at 8 years of age, 9 years of age, what happened is that all his peers had strong powerful legs, and this fellow did not have. And then when one day all the 8 or 9-year-olds were playing, then a tiger appeared from somewhere, and all the children ran away or climbed the trees, and this boy who did not have strong powerful feet, he got caught and eaten by the tiger. So, as a result, he did not cross through puberty, he did not have sex, so he did not have children, and so his genes were not passed. So, that is the idea. So, more successful individuals have higher chance of passing on their genes to the next generation. So, people thought, Holland thought of developing an optimization algorithm based on this idea. Start with enormous number of solutions, and among them do some sort of mating, so as to be able to produce next generation, and in every generation the better individuals according to your objective function, you take carry on to the next generation and so on. Finally, if natural selection works, in fact, here there is an artificial way of making the natural selection work among these solutions, among these individual solutions. Okay. And then if that process works, then at the end the population will have individuals which are good, good in the sense that they are fitter, they are more fit, and that means they have better values of the objective function, because that has been your criteria of selection. So, based on this logic, based on this heuristic, Holland developed genetic algorithm and for optimization. Ideally, that would be a better thing to say that it's an algorithm for simulation, but anyway, so they developed it for optimization. So, what genetic algorithm does? It works with populations of solutions, and it works through evolution of the population through generations, okay, and uses no derivatives. That is one good thing. Okay. That is, if you can avoid using derivatives, you have an advantage. It makes good forays into classically intractable problems, thereby justifying the computational cost. So, this is one thing that classically around 1970s, some problems were noticed and they were known to be difficult to solve by classical methods. For example, global optimization we discussed earlier. That is, if you want the global optimal point, then it is very difficult to find if it is hiding among many local optima. Then another problem was multi-objective optimization. If you want to optimize several objectives together, and then whatever trade off involved there, that if I want a low cost car, then I cannot expect so much comfort. So, what are all the solutions which will in a way be best for one of them or the other or a combination of them. Okay. So, if I want a good job, then it is unlikely that I will get it close to my home. Okay. So, I want a job close to my home and I want a good job. You have to work out some trade off between these two objectives. In any case, you would like a listing of all the jobs which are in some sense good compared to in seen against both these objectives. So, that is another problem in which the classical methods have a little issue, have a little problem. Okay. So, this is one thing in which genetic algorithms were shown to have a better advantage, a better efficiency, and therefore, it was said that so much computational cost is fine. A big disadvantage of genetic algorithms is that there is no guarantee. Okay. Till now, there is no proof as such which classical optimization researchers accept as guaranteed proof. The kind of proof that we have worked out, we have discussed for most of the other algorithms. Okay. So, now I told you that after 1970s or around that time, several things happened together. One was that Holland got this idea and developed it and was able to show its efficiency, its effectiveness in solving some problems, and he got a number of people around him who were impressed by that idea and who wanted to take it forward. This is one thing that happened. And something else that happened is that by that time the classical optimization researchers had sort of accepted that computational power is limited for the use of these great algorithms. Okay. And a third thing happened at the same time, which these genetic algorithm people grabbed and captured normally, because that method was born at that time. But classical algorithm people were already resigned that these require too much of computation. And that third thing that happened around that time is that computer technology, electronic hardware suddenly started making great progress, and almost monthly, weekly new developments started flooding the market, and computers started becoming very, very powerful. Okay. So, after that, year after year, the new computers make the old ones look puny, make them obsolete and much more powerful. So, the laptop that you use at home today is actually much more powerful compared to the supercomputers of not just 1980, it is much more powerful compared to the supercomputers of the time of the turn of the century. Okay, it is that difference. Okay. The amount of graphics that you just like that see for luxury, for pleasure on your screen, it was considered impossible to handle by very good computers of my student life. Okay. So, this unprecedented revolution of computer technology, electronics hardware suddenly was available to genetic algorithms who were trying to establish themselves right at that point. And somehow a terrific propaganda was afoot, and a terrific publicity came that genetic algorithms are very, very powerful, very, very powerful, to the extent that some people started believing that for nonlinear problems, classical optimization methods are no good. For nonlinear problems, you have to use genetic algorithms. That is the kind of sense some people started getting. Obviously, evidently, they were not very well trained in optimization. And another thing got noticed, something that you also have noticed, I also have noticed, that classical optimization methods are difficult to handle. They are algorithms which require you to understand and implement with a lot of capability in mathematics, numerical analysis and programming. In comparison, genetic algorithms are very easy. And so, even without learning optimization, people started applying genetic algorithms, and now they do not care so much about computational time, because enormous amount of computation done in 4 minutes. I am telling you, the laptop, your laptop, the amount of computation that it does in 4 minutes is actually an amount of computation that was considered prohibitive in 1999, 2000. Okay. So, that is too much. So, the classically trained people still try to write efficient programs, and they somehow care for computational resource. And then you will say, what is wrong with this genetic algorithms? Let it sort of solve the problem in 4 minutes. But then that means that a problem that actually could be solved in half millisecond, that is taking 4 minutes, okay, or say 50 milliseconds is taking 4 minutes. Okay. And that means by this time you are actually in a position to define more and more complicated problems, in which this entire thing should be possible to be put in a loop, which you should be in a position to execute thousands of times. If you try to execute this 4-minute loop thousands of times, then that becomes prohibitive in your laptop. Okay. So, this is a sort of evil cycle, in which what happens is that you try to put a lot of your resource, you try to put a lot of your energy in developing the genetic algorithm so nicely, so properly, putting its parameters so carefully, and that you can do only by trial and error. Okay. And you get shifted from your original field, and you actually end up producing poor quality work in your field and poor quality work in genetic algorithms. Okay. So, that is the disadvantage which you get if you get hooked to genetic algorithms, and that is why it is important that you know the classical optimization methods. Now, those classical optimization methods which were sort of written off as too costly, if you actually use in these contexts, if you have the capability to use that, then you will find that they were actually very efficient, and they could, like this, solve a problem for which the genetic algorithm runs for overnight. Okay. So, I have actually noticed many such things, many such cases in which the student comes and tells that this is my solution of such and such technical problem. Say, what method did you use? I used genetic algorithms, and say, why? Why not some other classical methods? Glibly they say that no, but sir, this is nonlinear, and it turns out that this is a least square problem actually. Okay. And even if it is nonlinear, so could you not do it by classical methods? No, classical methods do not converge, they do not work in nonlinear cases. I say, of course they work, and in many such cases I have shown how you can write a 50 line MATLAB code which solves that flat in minutes, for which, or minutes, or sometimes 30 seconds, for which you are spending 8 hours, 9 hours. Okay. So, understand that there is no pride in telling that your program runs for 12 hours. A program running for 12 hours is not in itself a matter of credit, if it could be made to give the same results or better results in 1 minute. Okay. So, that is the kind of thing that is happening with genetic algorithms, but then people are going on working in that and publishing papers and discussing that ad infinitum in a meaningless manner, but genetic algorithm workers apparently discuss with genetic algorithm workers only. So, can't be helped. Okay. So, but you should know what are these so called genetic algorithms which are such a rage in some societies. Of course, that rage is dying now. I will tell you that from 1980s to early years of this century, genetic algorithms were considered great idea. Okay. In last 10-15 years, I am noticing that many people have got disillusioned with genetic algorithms because of the reasons that I told you, that beyond a point it becomes the focus of the entire work unnecessarily, and your technical problem goes to the background. So, now it is understood, it is known that only those people are stuck to genetic algorithms who find the classical methods difficult to follow, difficult to understand, and therefore, they do not trust. Okay. But you should know what is genetic algorithm, how does it work, so that you are in a position to understand, appreciate, and if applicable criticize the work of others. Okay. So, let us see what is genetic algorithm and how does it work. And while discussing this, while studying this, have the necessary respect for the genetic algorithm, which is its due, because it is a new method, it is a new algorithm, which away from the classical method with a lot of things different, still is capable to work, and that itself is one good point. So, first of all, how do you work with genetic algorithm? You discretize and code the solutions. Okay. So, for a vector variable x bounded by xl and xu vectors, okay, say n variables. So, x has its lower limits in xl and upper limits in xu. Okay. So, from this point to this point, from this value to this value, you can discretize. So, you decide how many states from xl to xu you will have. Okay. So, you discretize that in terms of zeros and ones, binary. Okay. So, 0 or 1, that is a bit, binary digit. Okay. So, if you want to use Li bits to represent the value of the ith variable xi, okay, then for xi variable xi, you will have these many values that you can store in that discretization. Okay. So, in this substring or in this string, right now it is a string. Okay. So, Si 0, Si 1, Si 2, Si 3 and so on up to Si L minus 1. So, L digits here, each digit can be 0 or 1. Okay. Now, with these patterns of zeros and ones, how many numbers you can represent? You can represent these many. Okay. Because here it will be 0 or 1, here also it will be 0 and 1, 2 to the power that many. Okay. And now, from XL to XU, you want to find out that many equidistant values, and the way to do that is this. You see, the discretized values xi is xi lower limit plus the difference divided by this. This because you have to include xl also and xu also. Okay. So, that is why minus 1. So, that means suppose you have 4 bits. Okay, to represent a particular variable x 5. Okay. So, 4 bits means 32 states you can have, 32 values. Okay. And this variable x 5 has lower limit 2 and upper limit say 3.5. Okay. So, 2 to 3.5 you want to represent in how many bits? 4 bits, right. So, 16 values. So, 2 to 35. 2 will be represented as 0 0 0 0. Okay. 3.5 will be represented as 1 1 1 1. Okay. So, this is 0 and this is 15, right. So, the difference is 15. So, then you will say that the binary number, binary string that we will have for a particular value of x 5. Okay. So, that will be what? X 5 minus 2, x 5 minus 2 divided by 15, okay, into x 5 minus 2 divided by 15. So, that will be, so okay, we are actually trying to write the inverse of that. Okay. So, let us do that and then match it with that. So, say 15 differences, right. So, 2.1 will be 0 0 0 1, okay. 2.2 will be 0 0 0 1 0 and so on, right. So, this is how you will find. So, the difference of 1.5 will make a difference of this much. Okay. So, whatever is the, so this is 0 and this is 15. So, what we are trying to do is that S runs from 0 to 15 and accordingly x should run from 2 to 3.5. Okay. So, there will be 15 steps here and each step will mean 0.1. Okay. So, each step will mean 0.1. So, you will say that how many 0.1s are here? So, with that you have to count from here and add to 0. Okay. So, that is how you work it out. So, x minus 2, how many there? This is what you want to know, right. So, x 5 minus 2 divided by 0.1. Okay. So, that many you have to count starting from this. Okay. So, that many, and this when you transfer to binary you get these strings. Okay. And the inverse of that is actually here. Okay. So, you study this inverse. So, decoded value of S. Okay. So, whatever is the decoded value of S from 0 to 15, you put that divided by 15, okay, divided by 15, and that gives you the step for each, and that step you multiply with the size of the interval x, and that you add with the lowest value, okay, lower limit. So, for L I equal to 0, you will get this as 0. So, this whole thing is 0. So, you get 0. L I equal to 15, so not L I, S I equal to 0, you will get 0, and S I equal to 15, you will get 15 by 15 1, and therefore, 2 plus 3.5 minus 2 1.5. So, 2 plus 1.5 3.5. Okay. So, this is how linearly you code them. Typically, you will use more than 15 steps, more than 16 values, and therefore, you will end up using more bits. Okay. So, x 1 will have L 1 bits to represent it, x 2 will have L 2 bits to represent it, and so on. And finally, after representing the values of each of these variables in these individual strings, you concatenate all these strings. That is why these initial strings, earlier strings were called substrings. Now, you concatenate all of them, and you have got a large string, okay? Enormously large string. Okay? That is a binary number. Okay? That is a binary number, zeros and ones. So, this gives one long binary string of these many bits, okay? L 1 plus L 2 plus L 3 plus L 4, as many variables you have, n of them, okay, up to L n. Okay? So, this represents one solution x. So, this is binary coded GA, that is what I am discussing. There is a little more advanced, more complicated real coded GA also, but in order to get hold of the concept, you do not need to go there. Now, you work out a fitness function based on your objective function, because genetic algorithm operates with the fitness of individuals for survival. Okay. So, for maximization, you take the objective function itself as a fitness function and work with it. For minimization problem, the most common fitness function that you typically use, that people typically use, is this 1 by 1 plus f x. Actually, people thought of 1 by f x, that as f x goes down, 1 by f x will go up. But then that created some problem with many benchmark problems, because it is easy to define benchmark problems which have the global minimum at 0. Okay. Positive definite functions are very easy to define quickly like this, and they typically have the global minimum to be 0. And you try to judge an algorithm by testing whether it can find it. Okay. So, 1 by f x will become infinity, and there you will have trouble. So, people did not like that. So, they say that okay, make it like this. You will say that still the problem is there, if the function that you are actually optimizing, not the benchmark problem, the problem that you are actually optimizing, if that can take a value of -1, then at that point it will still happen like that. Okay. But then you have to settle down somewhere. Okay. If you try to do some artificial thing like this, that from one objective function you have to work out another fitness function, so that one reduces, the other increases. Okay. So, this is one option. There are other options, other choices people have made. Okay. Now, when do you say that except for this singularity business, why should this be considered a valid fitness function? Simple thing is that as f x, small f x reduces, does this increase necessarily, okay? And that you can verify from here. Okay. So, if a particular x point satisfies the first order necessary condition, the gradient 0 of small f, then it satisfies the first order necessary condition of the capital F also, this calligraphic F also. So, first order necessary conditions are satisfied at the same points. Then second order necessary conditions. So, if this fellow's gradient is 0, this fellow's gradient is also 0. At that point, at such a point, if the Hessian of the first fellow small f is a positive definite, then you say that this is a scalar by which you are defining positive scalar. So, if since you are defining it, dividing it with a positive scalar, So, this will be also positive definite, and this minus sign will make it negative definite, and this is anyway 0, because the gradient is 0 already established. So, this is gone at that point. So, you will find that a point gradient of this small f is 0 and the Hessian is positive definite will indeed be a point where the gradient of calligraphic f is 0 and Hessian negative definite. So, condition of minimization of this and condition of maximization of this happen to be same. The question of singularity still remains, but we disregard it. So, this much is fine for a conceptual discussion. Now, what is the framework? You generate a large number of random strings. You call this number as the population size. Okay. Random strings you generate S, one string representing one solution, another string representing another solution, and so on. So, hundreds of such strings, you decide what is your population size. Okay. So, x is corresponding to s s. At all these points, at all these strings, you evaluate the fitness function, and this has a little chain. You need to understand and appreciate that chain. It is not difficult. So, S corresponding to that string. So, when you take this string S and you know your coding plan. So, based on that, what is S1, what is S2, what is S3, you can cut them and decode each of them, x1 value, x2 value, x3 value, and so on. So, whatever is this 0 1 1 0 0 1, whatever it is, whatever big string is there, from that by cutting, you get the values of x1, x2, x3, x4. So, if you want, you can write those values, something, something, and so on. At this point, you can evaluate your function. Okay. Based on that, you can evaluate the fitness function. This you can do for one solution, one string, another string, for another string, you can do that, and you produce this large table with these many rows, as many is the population size. Okay. Now, here at this column you have got the corresponding fitness functions. Okay. So, evaluate the fitness functions for all of them and keep that. Okay. Fitness function is evaluated at these solutions and recorded. You have got this table, fine. Now, an iteration is called a generation here. So, through every iteration or generation, these solutions or strings are passed through GA operators, genetic algorithm operators, or genetic operators, namely reproduction, crossover, mutation, in analogy with genetic evolution. Okay. So, in genetics also what happens? This talks about sexual reproduction. Okay. So, in the reproduction process, there is a crossover of genes. Okay. So, you typically inherit some genes from your mother and some from your father. Now, that is represented here, and it may happen that some genes were neither in your father nor in your mother, okay, but you have got that. That is because of some mistakes in copying process, that is mutation. Okay. So, through these three operators, they are passed through probabilistically, and we need to study how these things happen. Now, reproduction or selection operator. Now, here something very interesting, and you need to study a little biology to understand the sense of it. Mammals reproduce by sexual reproduction, okay, but that is not the most basic or most prevalent kind of reproduction. The original reproduction process is actually asexual. Okay. like you have in microbes, okay, amoeba and so on. So, there one amoeba produces by by dividing into 2. Okay. So, there are 2 okay, from that. So, in a sense you can identify this as one of the 2 amoebas that is still remaining, and the other one you can consider as its child. Okay. But typically both are sort of equal. Okay. Now, it is possible that this produces, is a possibility that one organism produces another of its kind, that in turn produces another of its kind, and this perhaps produces so many of its kind, and each of them produces so many of that kind its kind. It is possible. Okay. Now, there mutation is the only way to have diversity in the population. Okay. I mean diversity. So, mutation in the gene to have diversity in their behavior, in the phenotype. Okay. And unless there is a diversity, there cannot be any talk about selection of some of the genes, selection of some of the individuals, some of the traits. Okay. Only when there is diversity, there can be selection, and there can be anything better. So, unless there is a delta x, you can never make a change from one x to another x. Okay. So, in asexual reproduction, diversity is possible only through mutation, okay, and that is in a way efficient, and in another way does not work with really complicated organisms. In relatively complicated algorithms, one can have sexual reproduction, but that does not mean that there have to be 2 different sexes. Okay. Sexual reproduction does not necessarily have to mean that there has to be a male and there has to be a female. That is actually not necessary. It might just mean that 2 individuals, when they exchange genetic material and produce a new DNA of their species, which has some genes from here and some genes from there, that is a possible blueprint for a new offspring, a new individual of that species. So, that sexual reproduction in principle can be without the there being 2 different sexes. And so, I am writing without sex difference. It just means genetic algorithm mating from 2 individuals. Okay. The third thing which mammals use is sexual reproduction with sex difference. Okay. Why mammals? Other vertebrates also, snakes, birds. Okay. So, this is actually a later development out of this development. Okay. So, from here how this develops, this is a very interesting story, okay, and you should read this book by Richard Dawkins. The selfish gene. Okay. This is the first book by Richard Dawkins, and it is terrific. So, there Richard Dawkins explains the mechanism of this sex difference developing, and since it is very interesting and you should know, I am telling you this little story, though it is a little out of context. See, when the process of reproduction in a species is such that of the members need to put their DNAs in close proximity by whatever mechanism, okay, in order to develop an offspring, then each of them will have some goals. Okay. Actually, they do not have goals in a conscious manner, but whatever is the goal that gets interpreted in the spirit of evolution by what gets selected. So, typically if this genetic material comes in a cell, this genetic material also comes in a cell. Okay. These two cells, when they merge and try to become a single cell, okay, that is a fertilized egg in our terminology now. Okay. So, in that there can be one strategy of making that cell have more nutrition, so that it has higher possibility of survival. And this was the so called honest strategy. In Richard Dawkins' selfish gene, this is called the honest strategy. So, the honest strategy is used by one set of individuals in that species, and they try to put a little more nutrition in that cell which they contribute, so that it has better chances of survival. The other possible strategy is called exploitative strategy, which tries to take advantage of the other fellow's contributions. Okay? And that fellow, that exploitative strategy, tries to produce more such cells, which will go and mate with a partner cell. Okay? And more such cells and more efficient to go and meet the partner cell. Okay? So, more efficient, better capable of meeting the other guy or other component, that should have speed, that should be light, and if you want to produce more of them, you cannot produce much nutrition in that. You cannot put too much nutrition in that, you have a limit. Okay. So, this strategy, this set of individuals tries to produce more fast light components. Okay. And it also notices that this partner is producing a cell with more nutrition. So, I can put even less nutrition in my component. So, it puts even less, and that in turn over generations is noticed by this, who now says what to do. Now, I put so much of nutrition in that, spent so much of effort, had to eat so much, and this has come to that, because the other party thought that he will put less. But anyway, it is my contribution, so much of contribution that is at risk. So, maybe put a little more. Okay. So, this side started putting more and more nutrition, producing a really solid pakka kind of material, and at every step this fellow was using feedback, and it was using its exploitative strategy against this fellow's honest strategy to have more sleek, faster, and even lighter members. Okay. So, slowly this evolved in eggs, and these evolved in sperms. Okay. This is how sexual reproduction with sex difference started, and among mammals that has enormously gone different. Now, genetic algorithm uses this, and you need to know that this is not necessary, this is possible. Okay. In actual biological field also it is possible, and certainly it was a precursor of today's reproduction with sex difference. Okay. So, genetic algorithm uses this, it requires two individuals to mate, but it does not have males and females. Okay. So, the idea is to enrich the next generation based on fitness of the current one. That is the idea in which with which the selection operators of genetic algorithms are developed. So, one simple possibility is this: probability of selection of a string S k. In that long list, one particular kth string, the probability of selection of that you work out like this. Its fitness function divided by the sum of all the fitness functions. Okay. So, like that you will have P 1, P 2, P 3, P 4 up to P 300 okay, for 300 strings, and sum of all of those will be 1, fine. Now, you work out a cumulative probability according to the way you have indexed them. For the first solution, C k is simply C 1 is simply P 1. For the second solution, C 2 is P 1 plus P 2. Then for C 3 is P 1 plus P 2 plus P 3. So, like this you will have continuously increasing, monotonically increasing sequence C 1, C 2, C 3, C 4, and finally finishing at C n equal to 1. So, that is n, capital N is population size, small n is the number of variables, that is mostly not under discussion right now. So, you organize them in the number line. Okay. Now, what you do? You produce a random number n times, okay, and wherever that number falls, random number between 0 and 1. Okay. In this interval, you produce a random number capital N times. Okay. So, wherever that number falls, if it falls between 0 and C 1, then you say one copy of this first string you put in the mating pool. Similarly, if the random number at one time falls here, a copy of C 3 you put in the mating pool. Like that you construct a mating pool. How many mating pool of how many individuals? N individuals, because in the next generation also you want n individual, that is your population size. So, you see, unlike biology, typical biological system where populations may grow, here you keep the population size same at every generation. In fact, there is good logic in that, because in a stable environment, in a stable biological environment, for a long time, over thousands of years, it is quite possible that there are roughly the same number of deer, roughly the same number of tigers, roughly the same number of grass blades. Okay. So, that makes sense. Human beings are a difference, because we have badly skewed the balance of the environment. So, every time it falls in this interval, you put a copy of C 3, and therefore, you will find that in the mating pool there are more copies of C 3 than copies of C 4, because if you generate random numbers between 0 and 1 n times, chances are more that they will fall in this huge interval compared to their probability of falling in this interval. Okay. So, the fitter individuals will have better chance of representation in the mating pool for the next generation. Okay. So, the fellow who had a better fitness function compared to others, that fellow had got P k large, and therefore, that got a larger interval here from C k minus 1 to C k, and therefore, n times random number generation will perhaps give more individuals here, and they will be richly represented in the mating pool. That is the selection. Okay. So, solutions with higher fitness will have more copies in the mating pool. So, they will, in a way you can say that they will get more chance of mating, and therefore, more chance of producing their offsprings and more chance of passing their better traits, better fitness to the next generation. That is how the evolution takes place. Okay. So, the string S m is selected. So, this is the selection operator. The result will be a mating pool of n new solutions with proportionally enriched strings. So, those strings which had higher fitness, they will have better representation in this mating pool for the next generation. Okay. Then we will have crossover operator. And this point onwards, we will continue in the next lecture.